Federal governments love a theme, especially when it comes to the budget.
This will be a very, very strong budget for women in this country, as it should be.
And this is a budget that puts equality for women at its centre.
And as the Finance Minister and the Minister for Women often says, we know equality for women is absolutely crucial for our prosperity.
Last year, Labor went big on the women's budget, pumping money into what Finance Minister Katy Gallagher called the most significant single-year investment in women's equality in at least 40 years. But with a new federal budget less than a fortnight away, the government is making a big pivot. When he steps up to the microphone at the Lowy Institute in Sydney today, Jim Chalmers' second budget will take shape. And the theme this time is security. We've used a voice actor to bring you the Treasurer's words.
We recognise in facing the most challenging strategic environment since World War II, economic resilience is an essential component of assuring our national security.
Jim Chalmers' third budget will be distinctly different from the first two budgets.
Jeff Chambers is the Australian's chief political correspondent.
What we now see in 2024, just over a year out from the next federal election, is a government that I think has realised just how big and grand their vision was and just how practically difficult it is to actually deliver on so many of their promises across so many different policy areas.
We're operating in some pretty tough conditions right now. Inflation is moderating but hanging around. Growth is slowing and conflict is escalating, pushing up oil prices and exposing vulnerabilities in global supply chains. Climate change is threatening our way of life and our livelihoods. Geopolitical tensions are rising, and we're still living in the shadow of a once-in-a-generation pandemic. It's a lot, and it's all coming off the back of decades of relative economic calm. Jim Chalmers will say today that Australia has historically stayed out of the drama. Not this time. When he hands down the federal budget on May 14, the Treasurer will be leaning right into it.
This is part of what our government means when we talk about the need for unprecedented coordination and ambition in our statecraft, harnessing all elements of our national power to advance Australia's interests. There'll be a familiar premium on responsibility, but a greater emphasis on security. Security in churn and change, not from churn and change.
Essentially, what Jim Chalmers is saying is Australia needs to find some certainty in the chaos by actively engaging and investing in the opportunities thrown up by all this flux. With certainty comes security and, hopefully, prosperity. That means responsibly encouraging the flow of capital into the Pacific and building up our region's climate resilience. But how on earth do you get there?
A lot of it links back to the path to net zero, to clean energy, and then obviously national security and economic resilience. There will be two streams, a national interest stream and a net zero transformation stream. So there's three key elements here. One, which is very interesting, is Jim Chalmers is trying to pull every lever he can to ensure that they support a flood of capital investment into Australia. And there are specific references under the FIRB changes to align foreign investment rules with future Made in Australia priorities and other economic and geostrategic policies, including foreign investors purchasing established build-to-rent properties and supporting more Pacific Island workers coming into the country. In terms of the national security element, the rules will be tightened in relation to state-owned enterprises, companies with links to offshore tax havens, and investors influenced by foreign laws that don't align with Australia's national interest. And they will not say this publicly, but that will obviously heavily impact efforts, endeavours, aspirations by Chinese companies to invest in strategic projects and other things here in Australia. For our friends and allies, the aim is that FIRB processes will be accelerated and streamlined with more resources to ensure that those allies and their investment can help turbocharge clean energy tech like batteries and hydrogen, support a green steel industry, help refine and process vast deposits of critical minerals and rare earths across Australia.
Basically, Jim Chalmers says we've got to create a bunch of new markets and bring existing ones into the here and now.
Our biggest opportunities lie in the intersection of industry, energy, our resources, our human capital, and our ability to attract and deploy investment.
That's why the Treasurer is backing in Future Made in Australia. That's a new government policy that will determine how taxpayer funds are spent across a handful of industries. The hope is that it'll shake up local manufacturing, giving us greater control over future industries, creating jobs, boosting the economy, and upping our sustainability game. But the reception to that plan has been mixed.
I think it becomes a bit of a concern, and particularly when we're so close to an election, when a government that has talked so much about being responsible in a high inflation environment during a cost of living crisis, when households and businesses are doing it really tough, when you start seeing billions of dollars flying around into industries and sectors that are not fully developed, question marks around our ability to compete with the big countries. So solar panels, for example, China has almost complete dominance on the supply chains. And while, of course, Australia needs to try and compete and have a strong role in some of these future-leaning industries, we also have to be realistic about where our money is best spent and where our time is best directed. Why are they picking certain industries and not other industries? Why are they backing certain technologies and not other technologies? And are they the right way forward? And I mean, a lot of it is not certain. Not to say we shouldn't be in the game, but there is deep concern that when you're forcing markets into certain directions, is that the best way to operate an economy, particularly one that faces such great global economic pressures?
Jim Chalmers has already been upfront about the fact that the Future Made Act won't be a taxpayer free-for-all. Quite the opposite. In today's speech, he'll spell out exactly how the government plans to test whether or not an investment is worth it.
First is the industry one where we can be competitive and more productive. Second, does it contribute to an orderly path to net zero? Thirdly, can it build the capabilities of our people and especially our regions? Fourth, will it improve Australia's national security and economic resilience? And fifth, does it recognise the key role of the private sector and deliver genuine value for money for government?
Experts are already warning the Treasurer to keep spending under control in the budget so as not to exacerbate our inflation problem. So will he stay the course or chase those big-time investments?
I think Jim Chalmers has tried to rein in spending as best as he can, but the government as a whole, led by the Prime Minister, has decided to press the button, and they believe that they are on the right path and that they are setting the country up for the future. The devil will be in the detail, as it always is in budgets. You hear a lot about big spending policy announcements, but this government has set up so many opaque off-budget funds. So sometimes it's tricky to really get your head around how much is actually going out the door, when it will be going out the door. And I think that will be the challenge looking at the budget this year.
Coming up, why the government is going big on quantum computing. While I've got you, I wanted to remind you our subscribers get this kind of detailed analysis 24/7. They also get first access to breaking news stories, newsletters and special events. Check us out at theaustralian.com.au. We'll be back after the break. One investment has emerged as a clear winner in the government's big net zero plan. That's hydrogen. Treasurer Jim Chalmers will tell the Lowy Institute today producing renewable hydrogen is one of its big priorities under the Future Made in Australia Act. Labor also wants to produce green metals and low-carbon liquid fuels and support manufacturers to do their bit in the battery supply chain. None of that is particularly surprising, but the path there is.
Critical technologies like quantum computing are essential here. The leap forward offered by quantum computing could also be a leap forward in our ambition to make a future here in Australia.
The Australian reported on Monday the government will spend $1 billion taxpayer dollars on a world-first quantum computer. You can't just pop out to JB Hi-Fi and buy a quantum computer. They're super specialised devices that use mysterious quantum mechanics to process incredibly complex information. They're way more powerful than the supercomputers in existence today, and that means they could move certain industries forward in leaps and bounds. But the catch is, this quantum computer will be designed and owned by an American company founded by Australians. It'll be located in Brisbane, and our $1 billion investment just buys us access. Here's Minister for Industry and Science, Ed Husic.
Our government has spoken a lot about a future made in Australia, about building manufacturing capabilities that'll be important for the economy and jobs longer term, and this quantum investment is consistent with that.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Queensland Premier Stephen Miles, who's funding the other half of the quantum computer, say the investment will create hundreds of ongoing jobs and lead to the establishment of research facilities attached to our universities. But does it live up to the government's own standards for a worthwhile investment?
There's still question marks over when it will be built, if it will be built. There's question marks over the so-called high-skilled jobs. I mean, what will these jobs entail? How many jobs will there be? And when will those jobs come to the fore? Because all of this is still under development. So when you're talking about a speculative punt, this is a big one. I mean, quantum is such a complex area. It will have such great benefits if the tech comes on as predicted. But we're going up against the US, China, Europe. So we need to ensure that we are shielding, supporting the domestic industry. And there's huge questions over whether we're doing that with this investment.
Jeff Chambers is the Australian's chief political correspondent. You can read that story, as well as all the nation's best journalism, right now at theaustralian.com.au.